Yo, what's happening everyone? Jinsula here with a brand new Pokemon Go video, and today we're going to be talking about endgame content in Pokemon Go. More specifically, this is going to be for players who are just like me, who've been playing since day one, or they've been playing for several years now, and they're at a point where essentially they have every single Pokemon that they can get. There's going to be one or two Pokemon that are missing from their Pokedex, but essentially they are at the endgame. There's different phases to your Pokemon Go journey, and I will say that the endgame is where a majority of players are currently at. This is why that there's so many different forms of content within Pokemon Go that are seemingly irrelevant at this time. So I kind of wanted to talk about what things you should be focusing in on as you play Pokemon Go in the endgame phase of your Pokemon Go journey. Now, some of you might be wondering whether or not you yourself are in the endgame of Pokemon Go. Well, there's three factors that really determine whether or not you're in the endgame, and it really comes down to what Pokemon you have. If you have a whole bunch of powered up Pokemon, you can consistently hit the ace rank in PvP, and when it comes to raid battles, you pretty much have every single counter that really is available to you, then I would say that you're in the endgame. Another factor is, of course, when you go engage with Pokemon Go, there's not a single Pokemon that you get excited about. I mean, like, you go out and explore and catch Pokemon to your whim, and you find yourself not being really excited about finding Pokemon anymore. Even if there's an in-game event or a brand new Pokemon, you really do not have that sort of excitement that you may have felt at the beginning of your Pokemon Go journey. That is another way you could determine whether or not you are in the endgame. There's going to be other aspects of Pokemon Go that are going to be more meaningful, aside from just sitting there and catching as many Pokemon as you can. Now, the third factor, which I would say determines whether or not you're in the endgame, is in relations to, well, you're just simply bored with Pokemon Go. Anything Niantic does with Pokemon Go, you essentially feel like you've already done it. And when it comes to special events, that's really the only thing you could look forward to. Like I'm talking about Go Fest and Go Tour. Aside from that, the day-to-day play is very boring and there's just nothing for you to do. And that's simply because you've pretty much done everything that Pokemon Go has to offer. So if any of these three factors applies to you, then congratulations, you're in the endgame. Now, there's still going to be so many different things that you can do in Pokemon Go, even if you are at this point. There's just so many different forms of progression, especially recently with something that Niantic implemented, which I'll get into later, but there's just so much to do in Pokemon Go. It's basically the ultimate sandbox game, and I think for a lot of players who have been playing since day one, there might be some things that they still need to do in order to be the absolute best of the best. And these are some of the things you should focus in on, like if you want to improve in raid battles, if you want to get even further in PvP, these are some of the things you have to focus in on. And yeah, let's just start talking about it. So, the first thing I really wanted to talk about is in regards to your Pokedex. Yeah, there's going to be so many players out there who have very little holes in their Pokedex. I myself have maybe like one or two missing from every single generation, some of which just simply haven't been released yet. But in general, I feel like there really isn't any Pokemon that I still need. And if there is, I'm pretty much going to get it later on down the road, so I'm not necessarily worried about it. And I do think that there's a lot of players out there who feel the same way. They do not feel like there's any Pokemon that they need for their collection. They pretty much caught all of them, and at that point, a huge aspect of Pokemon Go is now missing. Because when you first start playing Pokemon Go, filling up your Pokedex is such a satisfying grind. Like, you're going out, catching as many Pokemon as you can, evolving all the Pokemon that you can, simply because you want to fill out your Pokedex. Well, there's actually a lot to this aspect of Pokemon Go that players are just simply not aware of. If you go to the Pokedex and go to the bottom right corner, you will notice that there are several different Pokedexes, and they could include Pokedexes for lucky Pokemon, for shiny Pokemon, for shadow Pokemon, 100% IVs, 3 stars and 2 stars, and different things like that, and purified Pokemon as well. This is an aspect of Pokemon Go which I feel like is very much underrated. And in my opinion, I think the best fix for this would be if Niantic were to implement different badges that would actually count for these different Pokedexes. That way you could show off to your friends what Pokedexes you have completed. But this is a great place to start. If you find yourself feeling extremely bored with Pokemon Go, that there's just not any kind of new Pokemon for you to go out and explore and try to get, you could focus in on getting these Pokedexes filled up. Like, do as many lucky trades as you can. Just focus in on making sure you manage your friends list. Do a whole bunch of Team Go Rocket battles to get every single shadow, and purify those Pokemon to get every single purified Pokemon. And then you can go out and look for perfect IV Pokemon so that you could fill out your perfect IV Pokedex. There's just so much content here that I really do feel like you could stay active and stay involved in Pokemon Go for decades if you focus in on all these various Pokedexes. But of course, this is content that's not going to be for everyone. I don't think there's going to be a lot of players out there who really want to care about 100% IVs. Like, they just simply want to play Pokemon Go casually and catch whatever Pokemon is available. So I will say that there's different gameplay aspects of Pokemon Go that are going to be more universal. These are some of the things that you should definitely focus in on because it's going to improve your raid battles, it's going to improve your gameplay with PvP, and I do believe that if your worry is on longevity, then you should focus in on what the hardcore players are doing. Specifically, going after 100% IVs of some of the most meta Pokemon, and then farming up the candies and XL candies for these Pokemon so that you can max them out to the maximum level. I think this is a great way to keep Pokemon Go relevant. Like, when it comes to legendaries, if there's a particular legendary that's going to be a top tier raid attacker, you should focus in on farming up candies for that particular Pokemon. And even if that Pokemon is not in raid battles, you could do a whole bunch of raids to get rare candies and rare candies XL so that you could max out these Pokemon. This is definitely a form of content that has kept Pokemon Go going for a lot of hardcore players. There's people out there who want to get a full team of 6 of the best counters, and some of them are legendaries, and they want to max them out to the max level with the ideal moveset. And for them to do that, it's going to take years and years of dedicated work. And then of course, there's a lot of other gameplay aspects that definitely produces longevity, like the buddy adventure system. If you want to talk about min-maxing for some of your best Pokemon, then you should focus on getting them to best buddies along with powering them up. And yeah, having a whole collection of best buddies is definitely a way for you to brag about your account and the amount of grinding that you do, and it's something for you to do on the daily. Like, if you are focusing in on getting best buddies with a whole bunch of Pokemon, you're going to find yourself logging into the game every single day and doing various activities. You're going to try to walk 6 kilometers to get the hearts for that. You're going to do a whole bunch of battles. You're going to explore and try to find new Pokestops. You're going to be doing routes. There's just so many ways you could have your daily Pokemon Go play be a lot more robust by simply just focusing in on trying to get as many best buddy Pokemon as you can. So this is definitely one thing I suggest. If you have not dabbled with the buddy adventure system, now might be a good time for you to go into it, because having a whole bunch of best buddies is definitely going to help your account, especially because you could use best buddies to farm up mega energy, you could use buddies to farm up candy by walking them, and then of course they do get a little bit of a power boost if you hit best buddies with them and you have them as your buddies. So if you want to maximize your damage in raid battles, for example, then it might be good to have some best buddies of some of the best counters. This is something that not a lot of players are aware of, but you could actually give yourself a bit of a slight advantage within the Master League if you have a 100% IV of a top tier Pokemon and you have it as best buddies, because it will have a couple of additional levels when you play it in the Master League. So there's nothing but benefits to having a whole collection of a bunch of best buddy Pokemon. Take it from me, I have close to about 500 best buddies at this point, and I have to tell you, there's so many instances where there's a Pokemon that I never thought I would use, but because it's a best buddy, I end up using it for some area in Pokemon Go. Now, another thing you should be focusing in on when it comes to the end game is of course your trainer level. I think a lot of players tend to cap off at around level 42, mainly because the tasks and the experience that you need are definitely extremely difficult at this point, but make it a point to try to hit level 50 with your trainer. Like, there's really no downside to it. You do get a free Mewtwo with this special research. That's something that a lot of players are not aware of, and at the same time, it's just something that is a way for you to brag, and I think that's something that is missing within Pokemon Go. You kind of have to create those situations for yourself, but yeah, hitting level 50 is definitely a way for you to actually feel a sense of accomplishment, to feel a sense of completion when it comes to Pokemon Go. So if you're still not level 50 for your trainer, then that is definitely something you should be working on. And yeah, if you're in the end game, now is a better time than ever to actually get your trainer to level 50. I think the absolute best way is doing spotlight hours with a lucky egg. Like, sometimes they have a bonus where you can get double the experience for evolving your Pokemon. Rather than sitting there and trying to catch as many Pokemon as you can, have a whole bunch of trash Pokemon stocked up, and then pop a lucky egg and chain evolve them during the spotlight hours. And another good way is, of course, leveling up your friendship system. You get an insane amount of experience when you hit best friends with your friends. So that is something you should also keep in mind. And Niantic has made this just somewhat easier over time as well. Like, I don't know if a lot of you are aware of this, but if you hit best friends with one of your friends in your friends list, you could actually pop your lucky egg without having to time it with that friend. It used to be not that way, and it was a lot more difficult, but let's say you're about to hit best friends with a whole bunch of friends, and you could just do it. Like, open up a gift from those friends with a lucky egg on, and you're just gonna get a huge chunk of experience. And I think this is probably the best way in Pokemon Go right now. And then in terms of other things with experience, there's, I don't know, just doing a whole bunch of raids, I guess. Like, doing raid battles is actually a really great source of experience that a lot of players tend to neglect. Like, if you're chain raiding legendary raids with a lucky egg, you could actually walk out with a ton of experience. And I'm specifically talking about the Wednesday spotlight hours. On top of these being a great way for you to farm up legendaries and getting candy for those legendaries, you should also use them as an opportunity to get a ton of experience, especially if there's a bonus from an event. So yeah, gaining experience is always going to be important, and who knows, in the future they might increase the level cap to 60, in which case any experience that you've accumulated after you hit level 50 is definitely going to matter in that situation. So yeah, always be farming experience, even in the end game. That's something that you should always be looking for. And then finally, if you're in the end game, you should be dabbling in all different forms of progression in Pokemon Go. I'm talking about the new max battle system that's essentially going to be its own progression system that Niantic recently introduced. I think it's a great form of content for you to do if you're currently bored with Pokemon Go. Like, focus in on getting a whole bunch of Dynamax Pokemon, power up their moves, get them evolved and maxed out, and then use them in other max battles. Like right now, at the time that I'm recording this video, Beldum was introduced into max battles, and it is a little bit more difficult than the starter Pokemon that they had at the launch of this new feature. So, you know, it's its own progression system, you know? Maybe there will be some crossover with raiding and PvP in the future, but as of right now, max battles is a great form of side content for you to do, and I do predict in the future they're going to extend it and make it a lot more robust. So yeah, that's definitely something you could focus in on. Of course, there's PvP, the Go Battle League. Like, you may not necessarily care about hitting number 1 in the world, but at the very same time, like, the rewards are phenomenal for PvP. Like, you get just an insane amount of Stardust and experience and items and Pokemon that are exclusive to the Go Battle League. Like, it's a really great source of content in Pokemon Go. Unfortunately, at the time that I'm recording this video, it is a bit of a buggy mess, and there's just a lot of issues related to lag and, you know, the timing of moves and different things like that. Like, if you play on an Android phone, you're gonna have a very bad time, but you can still progress. Like, that's the one thing with PvP, is that yes, it is a broken mess right now and there's a lot of work that Niantic needs to do, but if you just want to casually play PvP, it can be a lot of fun. And it does require a lot of work and effort, which does end up becoming very rewarding. Like, if you have a whole bunch of Pokemon that are just collecting dust in your collection, look up whether or not it's going to be good for the Ultra League or the Great League, because you might be surprised. There are certain Pokemon that are really good for PvP, but not good elsewhere, and players tend to ignore them. And yeah, this is a great way for you to max out certain Pokemon that you typically would not care about. It's a great way to mess around with Pokemon that, you know, might just not necessarily be relevant or something that you would feel is iconic. Yeah, it's a great form of content that often gets neglected. I myself do not necessarily go about PvP in a hardcore way. I tend to play it very casually, and I have to tell you, it's a lot of fun, and it's actually very rewarding to try out different Pokemon and, you know, battling other players and figuring out different strategies, and then of course collecting a lot of really good rewards along the way. Yeah, it's a very solid form of content, and maybe if you're in the end game, this is the area of Pokemon Go you should start focusing in on. So yeah, if we want to talk about what to do in the end game of Pokemon Go, there's just a huge laundry list of different activities. It's just a matter of whether or not you feel motivated to actually go into these different forms of gameplay. Like, there's going to be a lot of players who just simply do not care about PvP, and it's totally understandable because it is very complex. It's also very broken, and in general, it's a very specific form of gameplay that may not appeal to everyone. And I do think that overall, it's still something worth exploring. And then, of course, it is an exploration-based game, so maybe trying out different communities in your area, maybe it's worth driving out to a town that you've never been to before and just seeing how Pokemon Go feels in those areas. There's just so many things that you can do. And I think at the very least, Pokemon Go is actually a pretty decent game right now. Like, we have our gripes. Obviously, the remote raid pass nerf was a huge hit to the community. There's a lot of design decisions that they've been making recently that are kind of questionable and had mixed reviews. But overall, I think Pokemon Go is still a very solid game. And if you're just looking to have some casual fun, there's just so much for you to do. And if you've hit the end game and you feel like the game doesn't offer you much anymore, give it a second look. Maybe there's an area of Pokemon Go that is actually a lot of fun and you're just not seeing it right now. So, yeah. I think Pokemon Go is definitely one of those games that has a lot of longevity. Niantic set it up really well for that, and if you want to ask a day one player what they think about what they could do in the end game, then yeah, I would say that the best thing for you to do is just try out something new within Pokemon Go. So yeah, but in any case, that's going to be it for this video. Let me know your thoughts regarding everything that I talked about down below. Is there a particular thing about Pokemon Go's endgame that you feel like is an important mention? Definitely say what it is in the comments. And yeah, let's have a great discussion. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm Jinsula. Hope you enjoyed this video. Be safe, have fun, love yourself, and I'll catch you in the next one.